Living in a medical hostel was an experience in itself. The long hours of studying, the endless rounds in the hospital, and the camaraderie with fellow students made it all worthwhile. But there was one aspect of hostel life that I'll never forget: the strange roommate I had the misfortune of sharing a room with. At first, he seemed like any other medical student. He was quiet and kept to himself, buried in his books most of the time. But as the days went by, I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. He had a peculiar habit of collecting strange objects: bones, vials of mysterious liquids, and even the occasional dead insect. I tried not to judge, thinking maybe it was just a quirky hobby of his. But then things started to get weirder. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find him standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with a blank expression. When I asked him what he was doing, he would simply mumble something about needing to check my pulse and then shuffle back to his own bed. I tried to brush it off as sleep deprivation playing tricks on my mind, but deep down, I knew there was something off about him. The breaking point came one night when I woke up to the sound of chanting coming from our room. I peered through bleary eyes to see my roommate surrounded by candles, his hands clasped together in a strange ritualistic gesture. I was frozen in fear, too terrified to make a sound as he muttered words that sounded like they belonged in an ancient incantation. I wanted to scream for help, but the words caught in my throat, and all I could do was watch in horror as he performed his eerie ceremony. I knew then that I had to get out of there. I packed my bags as quietly as I could and fled into the night, leaving behind the medical hostel and the strange roommate who had filled it with an aura of dread. To this day, I shudder to think about what might have happened if I had stayed, and I pray that I never have to encounter anyone like him ever again. There's something about moving into a new place that fills you with both excitement and nerves. For me, it was no different when I found myself in a cozy apartment, ready to share it with a roommate I'd never met before. Little did I know, this decision would lead me down a path of fear and dread. My new roommate seemed nice enough at first glance. They had a welcoming smile and seemed eager to show me around the place. But as the days passed, I started to notice some odd things about them. They had strange habits, like staying up all night and whispering to themselves in a language I couldn't understand. And then there were the noises coming from their room at odd hours, creaks and moans that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore my growing unease, chalking it up to living with a stranger for the first time. But then things took a darker turn. One night I woke up to find my roommate standing over my bed, their eyes wide and empty. I froze, too scared to move as they whispered something incomprehensible under their breath. I managed to stammer out a question, but they just shook their head and stumbled back to their room. From that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I started locking my door at night, afraid of what my roommate might do if they decided to pay me another visit. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, I came home to find the apartment empty. I called out for my roommate, but there was no answer. That's when I noticed the door to their room was ajar. Against my better judgment, I pushed it open and stepped inside. What I found made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in strange symbols drawn in what looked like blood, and in the center of the room there was a circle of candles, casting flickering shadows across the floor. I stumbled back in horror, realizing too late what kind of person I'd been living with all this time. I grabbed my things and ran, never looking back. To this day, I still have nightmares about that strange roommate and what they might have been capable of, and I pray that I never have to encounter someone like them ever again. I never thought I'd find myself sharing a space with someone who would make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It all started innocently enough, with an ad on a bulletin board seeking a roommate. I needed someone to split the rent with, and they seemed normal enough at first glance. The first time I met my soon-to-be roommate, there was something off about them. Maybe it was the way they smiled too widely, or the way their eyes seemed to linger on me a bit too long. But I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. At first, everything seemed fine. We shared some laughs, talked about our favorite TV shows, and even bonded over our love of pizza. But then things started to take a turn for the weird. I started noticing strange things around the apartment. Objects would go missing, only to turn up in the most unexpected places. I'd hear footsteps in the middle of the night, even though I knew my roommate was supposed to be asleep. And sometimes, when I looked into their eyes, I swear I saw something dark and sinister lurking behind them. But the strangest thing of all was the room they kept locked at all times. They claimed it was just a storage closet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. Whenever I asked about it, they would brush it off with a nervous laugh, but I could tell they were hiding something. As weeks turned into months, the atmosphere in the apartment grew increasingly tense. I found myself constantly on edge, never knowing what to expect next. And then one night, I made the mistake of snooping around while my roommate was out. I managed to pick the lock on the mysterious room, and what I found inside still haunts me to this day. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and there were jars filled with what looked like animal parts lining the shelves. But the most chilling discovery of all was the altar in the center of the room, adorned with candles and surrounded by photographs of people I didn't recognize. I didn't stick around to find out what it all meant. I packed my bags and left that very night, never looking back. To this day, I still wonder what dark secrets my strange roommate was hiding, and I shudder to think what might have happened if I had stayed any longer.